Joining us next is Fred Fleitz. Mr. Fleitz is a former CIA analyst and was a senior House Intelligence Committee staff member, and today is the chief analyst at Lignit. Mr. Fleitz, thank you for joining us today.
George, it's great to be here. We met a couple years ago, and you were kind enough to send me a copy of your excellent book, The American Catholic Voter, and I just want to take a chance to thank you for that.
I'm delighted, and I'm delighted for the plug for the book. Thanks so much. Fred, let me begin by asking you about this Snowden leak that came out yesterday at the Wall Street Journal, that a $52.6 billion black budget for fiscal year 2013, a budget that has not been open to the public in the past. Apparently there was a 178-page summary giving details to the successes and failures and objectives of some of these black budget movements that were going on. Let me ask you this. How does this affect our national security? Obviously, Mr. Snowden is more than just a whistleblower. He's a traitor to his nation, in my judgment. But how do you think this leak is going to affect us?
Well, thank you, George, for saying he's a traitor. He certainly is a traitor. I think this may do incalculable damage to U.S. national security. These documents were so sensitive that the Post itself had to admit that they could not publish most of them. They only published summary tables and very brief outlines of what these documents involved. The Post set up a special classified reading room, special computers not linked to the internet, to make sure that this material did not get leaked to the public. They said there was so much sensitive material on American sources and methods involving very sensitive collection programs and states who are hostile to the United States. They simply could not reveal most of this. And what concerns me is that China and Russia got full access to this material when Snowden was in Hong Kong and while he's been in Moscow. I think it's a big, big hit.
That's incredible. So what do we do on our end at this point in time? I read in these reports that there are like 4,000 people they're now considering that have high-level security that are going to sort of go over their qualifications or reasons for having high security. Is this are we closing the door after the cows have run away? What's happened here? How do we explain this?
Well, what was interesting in these reports that it did talk about that prior to Snowden's leaks, the National Security Agency was engaging in an effort to try to find individuals who might engage in this type of activity, or as the report said, who were engaging in anomalous behavior, who might be security risks. This is too little too late. I mean, a lot of the damage has already been done. Now, all we can do now is to try to clean up the mess. I think that effort has to go forward, and frankly, it should be redoubled. Part of the problem is not just intelligence community officers who are not properly vetted. There are too many contractors who are undergoing very light vetting, are not being properly investigated, and I think that also has to be looked into.
So they're hiring all these computer geeks, so to speak, and we have no idea whether or not they're capable or desirous of exposing secrets, et cetera, et cetera. So there have been flaws in the system here in hiring these contractors. Is that fair to say?
I think that to escape budget rules by Congress, the intelligence agencies have been going around them by hiring contractors. Really? You can pay contractors a lot more than you're able to pay federal employees for the same work. And this is I mean, aside from the fact I think this is probably illegal, they've taken a number of shortcuts on how to get these people on board.
Incredible. Let me ask you this. Now, I know you were a CIA analyst. When you read the annals of the CIA, particularly back in the years under Allen Dulles when he was head of the CIA, in the Eisenhower years up through the Bay of Pigs and the Kennedy years, there was a lot of disasters that the CIA was responsible for. A lot of men were killed in the field that probably shouldn't have happened in the first place, because Allen Dulles was more concerned with covert operations and gathering of information. And now that there has been released documents over the years, we see many of the failures that took place. My question to you is this: we're expanding. The CIA now has grown to 21,000 people, I believe. We are seeing tons and tons, billions and billions of dollars being spent or funneled through the CIA. We're not sure where exactly it's being spent. Has the agency improved versus its past record? Is a lot of this money going down the rat hole for things that are very questionable, or do you think they're actually carrying out their duty at this point in time in spending that money wisely?
I think the performance of the CIA since the reforms of the 1970s has been significantly improved. And I say this not just as a former CIA officer, but I served for 5 years on the House Intelligence Committee. And there's some pretty aggressive efforts by Congress to look at these budgets. The intelligence agencies aren't perfect. They make mistakes, and we certainly have seen over the last few weeks that I don't think these surveillance programs that Snowden leaked constitute spying on Americans, but clearly they could have been handled better. Mm-hmm. I think the mistakes of the CIA of the Cold War era, I think they've been fixed.
Well, that's good to hear, and that's encouraging, particularly since our tax dollars being spent. We got a couple of minutes left here, about 2 minutes left. Let me just ask you, Secretary of State spoke to the nation today saying we are going to take some action. Apparently, President Obama told pool reporters that we're going to take some actions, not telling us what those actions are yet. They've been leaking this all week long. Is this too little, too late? What is the purpose of what we're doing here? Does it make sense to you, or have we just procrastinated so long that they're just doing something here to look like they're doing something for the sake of doing something in Syria?
Well, I think chemical weapons were used, and I agree that Assad should not be allowed to get away with that, assuming we can prove that Assad did it. It concerns me that a so-called intelligence assessment was put forward by a political official like John Kerry. Why didn't an intelligence officer or a senior official put that forward? These things always have dissents and caveats. Were there any dissents to this, and what were they? These are questions we have to answer, and it makes me wonder about the validity of the case for going to war in Syria.
So, at the end of the day, we have about a minute left. Great Britain, our best ally, the Parliament yesterday voted down a matter of principle to think about joining the United States. Is that a serious blow to the United States and to President Obama's foreign policy, in your judgment?
It was an enormous and unprecedented blow, and it reflects the blowback from the Iraq War that I think is going to start becoming a bigger issue in this country.
What do you think the French are going to do?
The French do not have the problems with consulting with their parliament that the Brits have and that we have with Congress here. They can work for several months without consultations with Parliament. It looks like they're prepared to go forward, and unlike us, they're not telegraphing to Assad what they're going to do.
Well, and at the end of the day, the philosophy of leading from behind, is that beginning to bite us in the behind from what we're seeing reactions from our allies in this point in time?
I think leading from behind and by basically subcontracting our foreign policy to the UN is really coming back to bite this administration. They're now saying they're now trying to blame this on the UN and the UN's indecisiveness after years of using the UN as a crutch for not acting in situations like this. I think the president has really gotten himself into a bind.
Fred, thank you very much. Appreciate you coming on the show today.
Okay, thank you.
Coming up next is Nicole Gelinas, contributing editor at the Manhattan Institute, to talk about bankrupt cities. I'm George Marlin, and I've been pleased to be today substituting